Hello Year 6 and welcome to Wednesday's reading lesson. For today's lesson, you will need to download the extract of wholes that is on the website. It is a small extract today, just from the start of chapter 3, so it's something that we've already read in school together, but we're going to go in deeper today. Today's session is going to be a reading and annotating session, so you will need, if you're able to, print the text. Even better. If you're not, you need to be able to see the text and you need to be able to make some notes. If you're not able to see the text at the same time that I am reading it, then you might want to pause me, read through the extract yourself, and then come back and listen ready with a pen and paper so you can take some notes. In tomorrow's session, you're going to have some questions to answer on this extract, and so today's session with me will help you to be able to answer some of those things. Hopefully you have now got the extract in front of you, or you have already read it and you've come back to listen. I am going to read the extract and I'm going to talk through my thoughts as I read it to help you to make some notes. Before I begin, we're going to do a little vocabulary check. There's 5 words here that I want to make sure that we know the meaning of. So pause me now, write down what you think the meaning of those 5 words are, if you know them, and then restart and I will check that you are right. Okay, so the first word there, rifle. A rifle is a type of gun, which I'm sure most of you probably know. The second word there, stationary. Now, there are 2 types of stationary. One type of stationary means still, stopped, not moving. And another type of stationary means things like pens and paper and rulers and rubbers. Now, in the text, Stanley has a box of stationery from his mother. So this is the pens and paper kind. The way I like to remember the difference between the 2 types of stationery is this kind has an E in it, E-R-Y, and that I like to think of E for envelope, to think about writing and that kind of stationery. And the other type of stationery, when it means still or stopped, has an A instead of an E. The next word I want to make sure that you understand is stifling. Now, you can use stifling to describe something being really hot. It's stifling hot in here, if somewhere's stuffy. But more than hot, it does mean kind of stuffy, kind of a little bit claustrophobic. If you are being stifled, it means you're being kind of held back, held down. So I think it refers to the handcuffs as being stifling. So they are holding him down. The next word is slumped. Okay, I think it was the guard that was slumped. Now, if you're slumping in your chair, it means you were kind of hunched over. So if I was going to slump in my chair now, it would be a bit like this. Okay, I'm slumped. And he doesn't know whether the guard's asleep or not. And then the last word you need to understand is convicted. So if somebody is convicted of a crime, it means they go to court, they get accused of the crime, and then if they are convicted, it means they've been found guilty and they're going to have a punishment. And we already know, don't we, that Stanley is going to Camp Green Lake as his punishment. So now I'm going to read the extract to you and I'm going to give my thoughts out loud. You can add anything that you think, and you can always go back to the extract after the lesson and do your own notes. If you are following along with me, you can make some bullet points on a piece of paper if you haven't been able to print the extract. Make sure that you have noted down the meanings of those 5 key vocabulary words. Okay. Stanley Yarnats was the only passenger on the bus, not counting the driver or the guard. So I know that Stanley is the only criminal being taken at this time. He's the only person on the bus except for a guard who's watching him and the driver driving the bus. The guard sat next to the driver with the seat turned around facing Stanley, and a rifle lay across his lap. And we know a rifle is a gun, so if he's got a gun, that makes him maybe a little bit scary, gives him a little bit of power over Stanley, maybe suggesting that if Stanley were to try to run away, he might use the rifle. Stanley was sitting about 10 rows back, handcuffed to his armrest. His backpack lay on the seat next to him. It contained his toothbrush, toothpaste, and a box of stationery his mother had given him. He'd promised to write to her at least once a week. So there we have that word stationery. So his mum had given him maybe some pens and some paper, and he's going to write to her. So this is suggesting that maybe he has a close relationship with his mum, or at least he lives with his mum, and his mum has given him some things to take with him to the camp. He looked out the window, although there wasn't much to see, mostly fields of hay and cotton. So suggesting there that there's not much of a view. They're in the middle of nowhere, really, and we know that they are on their way to Texas. He was on a long bus ride to nowhere. The bus wasn't air-conditioned, and the hot, heavy air was almost as stifling as the handcuffs. So there we have that word stifling. The air is hot, so where it feels like it's so hot that you almost can't breathe, that's stifling, that's trapping you in, and the handcuffs are physically trapping him in. He's tied to the armrest. And there's no air conditioning on the bus, so really, really hot. Stanley and his parents had tried to pretend that he was just going away to camp for a while, just like rich kids do. That suggests to me that maybe Stanley is not a rich kid and his family don't have very much money because they think that going to camp, being able to go away on camp, is something for rich families only. When Stanley was younger, he used to play with stuffed animals and pretend the animals were at camp. Camp fun and games, he called it. Sometimes he'd have them play soccer with a marble. Other times they'd run an obstacle course or go bungee jumping off a table tied to broken rubber bands. Now Stanley tried to pretend he was going to camp fun and games. Maybe he'd make some friends, he thought. At least he'd get to swim in the lake. So we can tell there that when Stanley was little, he used to play games with his soft toys, and he used to pretend that they were doing things like going on camp. So maybe that's something that he wanted to do, and he did that through his toys. He's saying that at least here he might make some friends, which suggests that he doesn't really have many friends, and he'd get to swim in the lake, so perhaps he likes swimming. He didn't have any friends at home, so that's confirmed it there. He was overweight, and the kids at his middle school often teased him about his size. Even his teachers sometimes made cruel comments without realising it. On his last day of school, his math teacher, Mrs. Bell, taught ratios. As an example, she chose the heaviest kid in the class and the lightest kid in the class and had them weigh themselves. Stanley weighed 3 times as much as the other boy. Mrs. Bell wrote the ratio on the board, 3-1, unaware of how much embarrassment she had caused both of them. So Stanley's embarrassed about his weight, embarrassed about being overweight, and that is a bit of a nasty thing for the teacher to do, isn't it? Stanley was arrested later that day. He looked at the guard who sat slumped in his seat and wondered if he'd fallen asleep. The guard was wearing sunglasses, so Stanley couldn't see his eyes. So he's not sure whether he's asleep or not, but he's in a sleeping position, perhaps, and it looks like he might have. Stanley was not a bad kid. He was innocent of the crime for which he was convicted. He had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. So remember, we don't know what Stanley has supposedly done, but this is suggesting that he's innocent, so that he didn't do it. Even though he has been convicted, he has been found guilty and sent for punishment, this suggests that he hasn't actually done it, and as we read the story, we'll find out. I hope that you were able to make some notes as I read along, either on the extract itself or on a piece of paper. There's one final thing that I would like you to do now with that extract. So the very last part that I read said, Stanley was not a bad kid, he was innocent of the crime for which he was convicted, and he'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. What I want you to do is have a think now, either just think in your head, tell somebody if you've got somebody with you, or write down your thoughts about whether you believe this. So whether you believe that Stanley is innocent and that he'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, or is this just exactly what a guilty person would say? So have a think, decide what you think, make a bit of a prediction about whether he is actually innocent or not. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next lesson.